Your satellite stuff doesn't matter. My dancing brings joy to people's lives. Then she tried to steal my apartment. Opening post. I never thought I'd be writing something like this, but I need to get this off my chest before I lose my mind. I'm Marcus, 28, and I work as a satellite communications technician for a major aerospace company. It's the kind of job that sounds impressive until you try to explain it at family dinners, and then everyone's eyes glaze over before you finish your first sentence. My sister Rachel, 30, is a dance instructor who owns, or owned, but I'm getting ahead of myself, a small studio downtown. Growing up, she was always the talented one. Every recital, every competition, every graceful movement was met with thunderous applause from our parents, David and Linda. Meanwhile, I was the boring one, the kid who preferred taking apart radios to see how they worked instead of learning to pirouette. The labels stuck. Even now, when I'm literally working on technology that enables global communications and emergency response systems, my mother still introduces me as Marcus. He does something with computers. Rachel, on the other hand, is our brilliant dancer who brings art and beauty into the world. 3 months ago, Rachel showed up at my apartment with 2 suitcases and tears streaming down her face. Her longtime boyfriend had cheated on her, and she needed a place to stay, just for a few weeks, while she figured things out. Of course I said yes. She's my sister, and despite everything, I love her. The first week was fine. She was quiet, respectful, and genuinely grateful. She'd make dinner sometimes, we'd watch movies together, and for the first time in years, I felt like we were actually connecting as siblings. I even started to think that maybe this situation could help us move past the old family dynamics. Then things started to shift. It began with small comments. "Your guest room has such great natural light," she'd say. "Perfect for practicing." Before I knew it, she'd moved all the furniture to one side of the room and was using it as a dance studio for 3 hours every evening. The walls shook. The downstairs neighbors complained. But when I asked her to tone it down, she looked at me with those big eyes and said, "Marcus, you know I need to stay in shape for my students. This is my livelihood." Week 3 brought the mirrors. 3 full-length mirrors that she absolutely needed for proper form correction. She didn't ask, they just appeared one day when I came home from work. The guest room was no longer a guest room, it was Rachel's personal studio. By the end of the first month, she'd started bringing students to my apartment. "Just 1 or 2 private lessons," she promised. "The studio's landlord is being difficult about some repairs, and I can't lose these clients." I found myself coming home to strangers in my living room, waiting for their turn in what used to be my guest room. I tried to set boundaries. Really, I did. But every conversation ended the same way. Rachel would cry, call our parents, and suddenly I'd have my mother on the phone asking why I was being so cruel to my sister in her time of need. Dad would add his 2 cents about how family helps family, and remind me that Rachel had a gift that needs to be nurtured. The breaking point came 2 weeks ago. I just finished a grueling 14-hour shift installing a new communication array for an emergency response network. It was delicate, exhausting work that required absolute precision. One mistake could mean the difference between life and death for someone calling for help. I came home to find that Rachel had not only scheduled a full dance workshop in my apartment, but had also given out my address on her social media as the temporary location for her studio. There were 12 people in my living room. 12 strangers who'd moved my furniture, tracked dirt everywhere, and were using my kitchen like a break room. Rachel was in the middle of demonstrating a complicated routine, completely oblivious to my presence. "This has to stop," I told her after everyone left. She laughed. Actually laughed. "Oh, Marcus, don't be so dramatic. It's not like you use this space anyway. You're always at work doing your—" She waved her hand dismissively. "Satellite stuff." "My satellite stuff pays for this apartment," I said quietly. "And my dance brings joy to people's lives," she countered. "But I guess you wouldn't understand that. You've always been the practical one, the boring one. Some of us have actual passions." That's when something inside me finally snapped. Not in an angry way, but in a cold, clear moment of understanding. I realized that I'd been accepting this treatment my entire life, letting them define me as boring, because I chose a technical field over a performative art. I'd internalized it so deeply that I actually believed my work that literally saves lives and connects people across the globe, was somehow less valuable than Rachel's dancing. I gave her a week to find alternative arrangements. She didn't take me seriously. I'm not a confrontational person by nature. My job requires patience, precision, and strategic thinking. So that's exactly what I applied to this situation. But before I tell you what I did, I need you to understand something. I'm not proud of how far this escalated. I'm not writing this for validation or internet points. I'm writing this because I need to process what happened, and maybe, just maybe, someone else dealing with similar family dynamics needs to hear that it's okay to stand up for yourself, even when everyone tells you you're wrong. Update 1. The lock installation. It's been a week since my original post, and things have escalated in ways I never imagined. Thank you to everyone who commented with support and advice. Several of you suggested I should have just changed the locks on my apartment, but that wouldn't have solved the core problem. Rachel had a key, yes, but she also had our parents' complete support. Simply locking her out would have made me the villain in everyone's eyes, and she would have found a way back in, probably with our parents' help. Instead, I took a more strategic approach. The day after I gave Rachel the week's notice, I took a personal day from work. As soon as she left for her studio, I got to work on the guest room. First, I removed every piece of furniture she'd rearranged. Everything went into a storage unit I'd rented specifically for this purpose. Then came the mirrors. I carefully removed each one and stored them as well. But I didn't stop there. You see, my technical background came in handy. I installed a commercial-grade electronic lock on the guest room door, the kind that requires both a key code and a physical key to open. The kind we use on sensitive equipment rooms at work. It cost me nearly $400, but it was worth every penny. I also installed a small security camera in the hallway facing the door, connected to my phone so I could monitor any attempts to access the room. When Rachel came home that evening, she went straight to her studio as usual, only to find the door locked. The look of confusion on her face quickly morphed into rage. "What the hell is this?" she demanded, pulling on the door handle. "The guest room is no longer available for use," I said calmly. "As I told you, you have 6 more days to make alternative arrangements. You can't just lock me out of my own space." "It's not your space, Rachel. It never was. It's my apartment, and I've decided that room needs to remain empty for actual guests." She immediately called our parents. Within an hour, they were both at my apartment, my father red-faced with anger, my mother in tears. "How could you do this to your sister?" Mom wailed. "She needs that room for her art." "She has an entire studio downtown," I pointed out. "That's different," Dad interjected. "The landlord there is giving her problems. Family is supposed to support each other." "You're being selfish, Marcus." "Selfish?" I couldn't help but laugh. "I've been letting her live here rent-free for 2 months. I've had my home turned into a public dance studio without my consent. I've had strangers in my apartment at all hours. And I'm selfish." "You don't understand what it's like to have a calling," Rachel said, tears streaming down her face. "You just sit at a computer all day. I'm trying to build something beautiful, and you're destroying it because you're jealous." That stung, but I held my ground. "I'm not jealous, Rachel. I'm tired. I'm tired of being treated like my work doesn't matter. I'm tired of being called boring because I chose a different path. And I'm tired of you all acting like my life, my space, and my needs don't matter." My father stepped forward. "Open that door right now, Marcus." "No." It was the first time I'd ever directly defied my parents. The word hung in the air between us, and I watched my father's face cycle through surprise, anger, and then something I'd never seen before, uncertainty. "If you don't open that door," my mother said quietly, "we're done. You're no longer welcome in our home." "I understand," I replied, though my heart was breaking. "Rachel has 5 more days to find alternative arrangements. If she's not out by then, I'll have her formally evicted." They left in a storm of accusations and threats. Rachel slammed her bedroom door so hard that a picture fell off my wall. But I didn't unlock the guest room. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept checking the security camera, half expecting to see Rachel trying to break into the room. Instead, I saw her standing in front of the door at 3 a.m., just staring at it. She stood there for almost 20 minutes before finally going back to her room. The next day at work, I could barely concentrate. My supervisor, Janet, noticed something was wrong. "Everything okay, Marcus? Your satellite array installation last week was flawless, but you seem distracted today." I gave her a vague answer about family problems, but she pressed. Janet is one of those people who can see through BS from a mile away. So I told her. Everything. She listened without interrupting, then said something that shocked me. "You know your work here has saved approximately 300 lives in the past year alone, right?" I blinked. "What?" "The emergency communication systems you've installed and maintained. We track their usage. Your last installation alone has already been used in 42 emergency calls. 14 of those were life-threatening situations that were resolved because first responders could communicate effectively." She leaned forward. "Your family calls you boring?" You're a goddamn hero, Marcus. You just do your heroics quietly. I went home that day with a different perspective. Rachel was in the living room with 5 of her students, despite my clear instructions that no more classes were to be held in my apartment. I didn't say anything. I just went to my room and started documenting everything, taking photos, recording videos, keeping a detailed log. If this was going to escalate, I needed evidence. 3 days left on her notice, and Rachel still hadn't made any effort to leave. If anything, she doubled down, scheduling even more students. She was calling my bluff. She was about to learn that I don't bluff. Update 2. The trespassing charges. It's been 3 weeks since my last update, and I need to warn you, this got ugly. Really ugly. But sometimes, when you've been pushed around your entire life, you have to push back hard enough to make it stop. Rachel didn't leave after the week was up. Of course she didn't. On day 8, I served her with a formal eviction notice. I'd hired a lawyer, something I never thought I'd have to do with family. The look on her face when the process server handed her the papers was a mixture of shock and rage. "You actually did it," she said, holding the papers like they were contaminated. "You're actually trying to evict your own sister." "You have 30 days, I replied. "That's what the law requires." She laughed bitterly. "You think I'm going to leave? Mom and Dad are already talking to their lawyer. You can't evict family, Marcus. We have rights." She was wrong, but I let her believe what she wanted. Meanwhile, I continued documenting everything. Every unauthorized class, every stranger in my apartment, every violation of my clear instructions. My lawyer, a sharp woman named Patricia who specialized in tenant law, assured me we had an ironclad case. But Rachel escalated first. 2 weeks into the 30-day notice period, I came home to find my apartment door open. Not broken, just open. Rachel was inside with what looked like 20 people, conducting a full dance workshop. They'd moved all my living room furniture into my bedroom, piling it haphazardly. My television was on the floor. My work laptop with sensitive aerospace data, was buried under someone's gym bag. "What the hell are you doing?" I shouted over the music. Rachel didn't even pause her routine. "I'm working, Marcus. Something you'd understand if you had any passion in your life." That's when I noticed that one of her students was recording everything on their phone. The smirk on Rachel's face told me this was intentional. She wanted me to lose my temper. She wanted me to become the villain in her narrative. Instead, I calmly took out my own phone and called the police. "I'd like to report a trespassing incident," I said clearly. "I have multiple unauthorized individuals in my apartment who refuse to leave." The music stopped. Rachel's face went white. "You didn't." "I have a legal eviction notice in progress," I continued to the dispatcher. "The tenant has brought approximately 20 unauthorized individuals into my home without permission." The police arrived within 15 minutes. By then, Rachel had tried to spin the story. "We were family, this was a misunderstanding, I was having some kind of breakdown." But I had everything documented. The eviction notice, the security footage, the written warnings. Officer Chen, the lead officer, reviewed everything carefully. "Ma'am," he said to Rachel, "you need to ask these people to leave immediately, or we'll have to issue citations for criminal trespassing." "This is my home," Rachel protested. "You're a tenant under active eviction," Officer Chen corrected. "You don't have the authority to invite anyone onto the premises without the owner's permission." The students left quickly, embarrassed and confused. Several demanded refunds from Rachel on their way out. But the real blow came when Officer Chen turned back to Rachel. "Ma'am, I'm also going to need to document this incident. If you're running a business out of this residential property without proper permits or the owner's permission, that's a separate violation." Rachel's face crumbled. "It's just a few dance classes." "That you're charging for?" the officer asked. "That's a business operation." That night, Rachel didn't come home. She stayed at our parents' house, and the next morning, I was bombarded with calls and texts from extended family. I was heartless. I was destroying Rachel's life. I was jealous of her success. The narrative was clear. I was the villain who couldn't stand to see his talented sister shine. But here's the thing about working in satellite communications. You learn that signals can be blocked, but the truth always finds a way through. Rachel made a critical mistake. In her anger and desperation, she posted about the situation on her studio's social media page, framing herself as the victim of a jealous brother who was trying to destroy her business. She included photos from inside my apartment, specifically mentioning the address and calling it her temporary studio location. Patricia, my lawyer, was ecstatic when I showed her the posts. She just admitted, in writing, to running an illegal business operation out of your residence. This is gold, Marcus. We amended our eviction filing to include running an unauthorized business, and Patricia suggested we also file a civil suit for damages and lost income. I'd had to take 3 personal days to deal with the situation, and my apartment had suffered minor damage from the constant foot traffic and furniture moving. But the real consequences came from an unexpected source. One of Rachel's students, apparently upset about the canceled classes and the chaos, filed a complaint with the city's business licensing department. They investigated and found that Rachel had been operating her dance studio in violation of several codes: inadequate insurance, improper zoning permissions, and failure to maintain proper safety standards. Her studio was temporarily shut down pending a full review. That's when Rachel made her biggest mistake. Update 3. The break-in. It happened on a Tuesday night, exactly 25 days into the eviction notice period. I was working late, finishing up calibrations on a new military communication satellite that was launching the next month. It was delicate work that required absolute concentration, so I turned off my phone. When I finally checked it at 11 p.m., I had 17 missed calls from my security system and a video that made my blood run cold. Rachel had returned to the apartment with a locksmith. In the video, I could hear her clearly telling him that she'd been locked out of her own room, that she'd lost the key, and needed emergency access. The locksmith, believing her story, had started working on the electronic lock I'd installed on the guest room. But here's where my paranoid preparations paid off. The lock I'd installed had a tamper alarm connected to both my phone and my security company. When the locksmith triggered it, the security company had immediately dispatched someone to investigate. They arrived before the locksmith could finish, and found Rachel trying to convince him to continue despite the blaring alarm. The security guard, a former cop named Thomas, handled it perfectly. He calmly explained to the locksmith that this was a potential break-in situation and asked him to stop work immediately. The locksmith, realizing he'd been misled, packed up and left. But Rachel didn't. She screamed at Thomas, telling him he had no right to interfere, that this was her home, her room. Thomas simply stood there, recording everything, while calling the actual police. By the time I arrived home, there were 2 police cars in front of my building. Rachel was in the back of one of them. Officer Chen was there again, looking tired. "Mr. Thompson, your sister attempted to break into a locked room in your apartment. The security guard has everything on video, and the locksmith is willing to testify that she misrepresented the situation. Do you want to press charges?" I looked at the police car where Rachel sat. Even from a distance, I could see her staring at me, her face a mask of fury and disbelief. For a moment, I hesitated. This was my sister. We'd grown up together, shared holidays, family vacations. But then I remembered all the years of being dismissed, of being called boring, of having my achievements minimized while hers were celebrated. "Yes," I said. "I want to press charges." The next few hours were a blur of paperwork and statements. Rachel was charged with attempted breaking and entering, and criminal trespassing. Because of the eviction notice in progress, the charges were enhanced. She was released on her own recognizance, but with a restraining order that prevented her from coming within 500 feet of my apartment. The family explosion was immediate and nuclear. My parents showed up at my work the next day. Security had to escort them out when they wouldn't leave. My mother was sobbing. My father was threatening to disown me. They'd had to bail Rachel out, hire her a lawyer, and now her dance studio was facing permanent closure because the criminal charges invalidated her business insurance. "You've ruined her life," my mother screamed as security led them away. "Over what?" "A room. Your pride. She's your sister." My supervisor, Janet, witnessed the whole thing. She called me into her office afterward. "Marcus, I don't usually get involved in personal matters," she began, and I prepared myself to be fired. "Instead," she continued, "but I want you to know that the company has resources available. We have counselors who specialize in family crisis situations. And if you need security at your home, we can arrange that too." I was stunned. "Why would you do that for me?" "Because you're one of our best technicians, and frankly, because I've watched you pour yourself into this job for 3 years without ever asking for anything. You've never missed a deadline, never complained about overtime, never let your personal life affect your work. Until now, I didn't even know you had a family." She leaned back in her chair. "You know what that tells me? It tells me you've been dealing with this toxicity for a long time, and you've been doing it alone." That afternoon, she introduced me to Dr. Kim, a counselor who worked with the company's employee assistance program. For the first time in my life, I talked to someone professional about my family dynamics. About being labeled the boring one, while Rachel was the talented one. About how those labels had shaped my entire self-image. "You know what's interesting?" Dr. Kim said after our first session. You've internalized their narrative so completely that you described your own work as just satellite stuff 3 times in the past hour. You're literally working on technology that saves lives, that connects the world, that enables military operations and emergency responses. But you minimize it because it's not artistic enough for your family's values. She was right. I'd spent so long accepting their framework that I'd never questioned why dance was inherently more valuable than satellite engineering. Meanwhile, the legal situation was progressing. Rachel's lawyer tried to argue that the charges should be dropped because we were family, but the prosecutor, a no-nonsense woman named Sarah Martinez, wasn't having it. Family members can be victims of crimes too, she said firmly. In fact, domestic situations often escalate precisely because people think family bonds exempt them from legal consequences. Update 4. The courtroom. The trial date was set for 3 months after the incident. In that time, my life changed dramatically while Rachel's continued to implode. First, the good news. My work on the military satellite project had been noticed by the Department of Defense. They requested me specifically for a new classified project involving emergency communication systems for special operations. It came with a significant promotion and a security clearance that put me in a whole different league professionally. I was now Senior Satellite Systems Engineer Marcus Thompson, with a salary that nearly doubled my previous one. Janet called me into her office to deliver the news personally. The DoD was impressed by your precision and reliability. They said your work was, and I quote, exemplary in its attention to detail and critical thinking. Still think you're the boring one. But while my career soared, my family relationships hit rock bottom. Rachel's dance studio never reopened. The combination of city violations, loss of insurance due to the criminal charges, and the scandal of her arrest had destroyed her reputation. Many of her students found other instructors, and the few who remained loyal couldn't sustain the business. She'd had to move back in with our parents, who blamed me entirely for her downfall. The trial was on a Thursday. I wore my best suit and arrived early with Patricia, my civil attorney, even though this was the criminal trial. She wanted to observe for our upcoming civil case. Rachel arrived with our parents and a lawyer who looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. She was wearing a conservative dress, her hair pulled back, looking nothing like the vibrant dance instructor she'd always been. For a moment, I felt a pang of sympathy. Then I remembered the security footage of her trying to break into my apartment, and the sympathy evaporated. The trial itself was straightforward. The prosecutor presented the security footage, the locksmith's testimony, and the documentation of the eviction notice. Rachel's lawyer tried to argue that she had a reasonable belief that she had access to the room, but the evidence was overwhelming. The most dramatic moment came when Rachel took the stand. Her lawyer asked her to explain her side of the story. I needed that room for my work, she said, tears streaming down her face. My brother knew how important my dance was, how much my students depended on me. He locked me out of spite, because he's always been jealous that our parents loved me more. There was a gasp from the gallery. She'd actually said it out loud, admitted what we'd all known but never acknowledged. The prosecutor stood for cross-examination. Ms. Thompson, did your brother inform you that you needed to leave his apartment? Yes, but... Did he serve you with a legal eviction notice? Yes, but family. Did you attempt to gain unauthorized access to a locked room in his apartment after being served with that notice? Rachel's shoulders slumped. Yes. No further questions. The verdict was guilty on both counts. The judge, an older woman with sharp eyes, looked at Rachel with a mixture of disappointment and frustration. Ms. Thompson, family relationships do not exempt us from respecting others' property and boundaries. Your brother had every right to control access to his home, and you violated that right repeatedly. This court sentences you to 2 years probation, 200 hours of community service, and you are required to attend weekly counseling sessions to address what appears to be a serious inability to respect boundaries. Rachel sobbed. Our mother wailed. Our father stood up and pointed at me. You destroyed your sister, he shouted. You destroyed our family. The judge banged her gavel. Sir, sit down or I'll hold you in contempt. As we left the courthouse, I thought that was the end of it. Rachel was convicted, I had my restraining order, and I could finally move on with my life. I was wrong. Update 5. The Reckoning. It's been 4 months since the trial, and I'm writing this final update from my new apartment, a larger place in a better neighborhood that I could afford thanks to my promotion. The guest room remains locked, though for different reasons now. The first 2 months after the trial were the hardest. My parents cut off all contact with me. Extended family chose sides, and most chose Rachel's. I received hate mail from her former students, blaming me for destroying her career. Someone even created a Facebook page called Justice for Rachel, that painted me as a monster who destroyed his talented sister out of jealousy. But something interesting happened. A few of Rachel's former students reached out to me privately with a different story. They told me about how she'd often been late to classes, how she'd canceled frequently, how she'd used their payment for personal expenses rather than studio improvements. One student, Amy, told me that Rachel had often talked about her boring brother who was wasting his life on computers while she was creating art. I always thought it was weird, Amy said. Like, why was she so focused on putting you down? You weren't even there. Meanwhile, my work life flourished. The DoD project was a massive success. We developed a new encrypted communication system that could work in areas with zero infrastructure, perfect for disaster relief and special operations. My name was listed as lead engineer on the patent application. When it was approved for use in a major disaster relief operation in Southeast Asia, Janet called me into her office again. The system you designed just helped coordinate the rescue of over 3,000 people from a flood zone, she said. Still think your work doesn't matter? I was promoted again, this time to principal engineer, making me one of the youngest in the company's history to hold that title. The salary increase meant I could afford not just a better apartment but also to start saving for a house. But the real breakthrough came from an unexpected source. 3 months after the trial, I received an email from Rachel. My first instinct was to delete it. The restraining order was still in effect, and even email contact was a violation. But the subject line stopped me. You were right. I called Patricia immediately. She advised me to read it but not respond, and to forward it to her immediately. The email was long, rambling in places, but coherent. Rachel explained that her court-mandated therapy had been eye-opening. Her therapist, Dr. Hoffman, had helped her understand something she'd never considered, that our parents' favoritism hadn't done her any favors. I've been enabled my entire life, she wrote. Every time I failed, Mom and Dad cushioned the fall. Every time I acted entitled, they justified it. I never learned boundaries because no one ever enforced them with me. I grew up thinking the world owed me space for my art, that my passion was more important than other people's needs. She went on to explain how her business had been failing long before she moved into my apartment. She'd been using the temporary studio situation to avoid dealing with her actual problems: poor business management, lack of professional boundaries with students, and a complete inability to handle criticism or setback. Dr. Hoffman helped me see that I've been jealous of you, not the other way around. You've always been self-sufficient. You've built your career on your own merit. No one had to make special accommodations for you or constantly prop you up. You succeeded because you're genuinely good at what you do. The email continued with apologies, real ones, not the "I'm sorry but" kind. She took responsibility for trying to take over my apartment, for the break-in attempt, for turning our parents against me. She acknowledged that her actions had consequences she'd never foreseen: the criminal record that now made it impossible for her to rent a studio space, the reputation damage that meant even if she could rent a space, she'd have no students. I'm working at a gym now, she wrote. Just at the front desk. It's humbling. But for the first time in my life, I'm earning my own way without someone enabling me. It's hard, but Dr. Hoffman says that's the point. I need to learn what you've always known: how to stand on my own feet. The email ended with a revelation that shocked me: Mom and Dad are in therapy too, though they die before admitting it to you. Dr. Hoffman referred them to someone who specializes in family dynamics and favoritism. I don't know if they'll ever reach out to you, but I know they're struggling with realizing how much damage they did to both of us. Me by enabling my worst traits, and you by constantly diminishing your achievements. I sat with that email for a long time. Part of me wanted to respond, to offer forgiveness, to try to rebuild our relationship. But Patricia advised waiting. Let her continue her therapy, she said. Real change takes time. If she's serious about making amends, she'll still be serious in 6 months or a year. She was right. 2 weeks ago, I received another email from Rachel. This time, it included a document, a letter from Dr. Hoffman confirming that Rachel had been consistent with her therapy, had shown genuine growth, and was working on a formal amends process that respected my boundaries. I'm not asking to be part of your life again, Rachel wrote. I'm not asking you to forgive me. I'm just letting you know that I finally understand the damage I did, not just in the past year but throughout our entire lives. You were never the boring one. You were the reliable one, the brilliant one, the one who didn't need constant validation to know your worth. I see that now. Yesterday, my parents sent their first communication in 4 months, a birthday card. Inside, along with the generic birthday wishes, was a handwritten note from my mother. We're learning that we failed you both in different ways. We're not ready to talk yet, but we wanted you to know we're working on understanding how we contributed to this situation. Your father says to tell you he read about your satellite project in an industry magazine. He said it was impressive. I know that's not enough, not nearly enough, but it's a start. It was signed, Mom and Dad, with a P.S. Rachel showed us the article about your disaster relief system. 3,000 people, Marcus. You saved 3,000 people. Resolution. I'm writing this final update from my home office, looking at the framed patent certificate on my wall. Next to it is something new, a photo from last week. It's me receiving an industry award for innovation in emergency communication systems. Janet is there, along with my team, all genuinely proud of what we've accomplished. I've learned so much through this experience. I've learned that boundaries aren't cruel, they're necessary. I've learned that family toxicity doesn't have to define you. Most importantly, I've learned that being boring might just mean being reliable, stable, and quietly exceptional. Rachel and I have started exchanging emails, carefully, with Dr. Hoffman's and Patricia's guidance. She's rebuilding her life, slowly and honestly. She's taking business classes at the community college and working full-time at the gym. She's even started teaching a few fitness classes, not dance, but basic aerobics. She says it's humbling but honest work. My parents and I haven't reconciled yet, but their therapist has reached out to Dr. Kim, my counselor, about possibly doing a joint session in the future. We're taking it slow. 28 years of dysfunctional dynamics don't get fixed overnight. The guest room in my new apartment has been converted into a proper home office where I can work on classified projects securely. Sometimes I think about how different things might have been if I'd stood up for myself earlier, if I'd refused to accept the boring label from the start. But Dr. Kim reminds me that we can't change the past, we can only learn from it. Last month, the disaster relief system I designed was used in another operation, this time saving an estimated 5,000 people from a hurricane disaster zone. The DoD wants me to lead a team developing the next generation of the technology. At 29, I'll be one of the youngest project leads in the company's history. I'm still the same person who'd rather work on satellites than perform on a stage. I still get excited about signal propagation and orbital mechanics. I'm still boring by my family's old standards. But now I know that my boring work creates extraordinary outcomes. My boring personality provides stable ground for others to depend on. My boring life is actually quite fulfilling when I'm not trying to live up to someone else's definition of interesting. Rachel sent me one final message last week that I want to share. I spent my whole life making noise, demanding attention, taking up space. You spent yours quietly making the world better. I finally understand which one of us was actually creating something valuable. I don't know if we'll ever be close again. I don't know if family dinners will ever be comfortable. But I do know that I'll never again let anyone make me feel inferior for choosing substance over performance. The world needs its dancers and artists, yes. But it also needs its engineers and technicians, the boring ones who keep the lights on, the communications flowing, and the emergency systems running. To anyone out there dealing with similar family dynamics, know this: your worth isn't determined by how much attention you attract or how much space you take up. Sometimes the most important work is done quietly, without applause. And that's not boring, that's heroic. The restraining order expires next month. Rachel has asked, through Dr. Hoffman, if I'd be willing to meet for coffee. I'm thinking about it. Forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting, and rebuilding doesn't mean returning to old patterns. But maybe, just maybe, we can build something new. Something based on mutual respect rather than competition for our parents' approval. My new apartment is peaceful. My work is fulfilling. My life, boring as it might seem to others, is mine. And for the first time in 29 years, that's more than enough. It's everything.